Welcome to Mindful Escape, the podcast that inspires you to live your best life. My name's Leighton Jewett and I'm your host, and today we have Peter Ely on the show. Peter's a hypnotherapist and used to work in security, so it's been quite the transition. He talks about his mental health, the challenges that he's been through, and he also talks about how to reframe your mindset and be more positive from day to day. This is a really great episode, so listen closely and we'll jump straight in. Peter, thank you for coming on to Mindful Escape. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Leighton. Thank you for having me. My name is Peter Ely. I am a solution-focused hypnotherapist. I've been doing that for about 18 months. And prior to that, I spent 20-odd years in the corporate security world, looking after corporate buildings, corporate clients, and the security officers that looked after those buildings.
Yeah, okay. So I was lucky enough to have a session with you, trial your hypnotherapy, and it's not something that I've done before. What was it that got you into this type of work?
So it's something that's kind of touched my life all the way through. So at 18, I started a psychology degree. I unfortunately had a health issue. After I returned from Thailand, coincidentally, I drank too much on the plane and I ended up having a health issue. And so I couldn't finish my degree. I went off and did other stuff, but a friend of mine did a hypnotherapy course and I helped him with that using my psychology knowledge. And then people that I've met through my life have kind of been hypnotherapists. I've gone through bouts of kind of depression and anxiety that I then utilized hypnotherapy to help me with. And I basically got made redundant. I had a bit of money to invest in myself. And I thought, you know what? Hypnotherapy's been there. It's been in and out of my life. I love helping people. I'm going to give it a go. Found a really lovely course that I enjoyed, and that, it's a qualified course. So you get a qualification at the end of it, and just fell in love with the responses from clients and what started happening, the changes in clients, which then impacted and actually created changes in me. And I had a really, it's kind of, I wrote about it a while back, but I was sitting at my desk January 2 years ago, and my cheeks were really hurting and I didn't know what it was. It was kind of a weird thing for me, right? And I went to the mirror in my hallway and found that I just had this huge smile on my face and that I hadn't been smiling for so long that my cheeks hurt. And I realized that this was the thing that I wanted to do with my life. So, yeah.
So powerful. I love that. And just, making you smile, enjoying what you're doing. So you were working in security before, and obviously this opportunity came up to do the course. Was there a specific time or something that happened in your life that made you think, okay, I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing? Was it the redundancy? Was there something else along the way?
I think there was a couple of things. So I worked with a company for a really long time. I was very, very good at my job. The job role was called a contract manager. I looked after a number of contracts with a number of security officers. My portfolio was consistent. It was making good money. And I was kind of like seen as a very good contract manager. And then I got a new line manager who was kind of a bit of a micromanager. And that's when my mental health started to take a bit of a downturn. Nothing had changed. No contracts had changed. Everything was still the same, but apparently everything that I'd been doing wasn't good enough. And so it became a very toxic workplace for me, a toxic environment for me. And so I look back on that redundancy. At the time of being made redundant, I was really upset. I was 45 years of age and I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'd spent a lot of years working with this company, like a third of my life. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to work anywhere else again. I don't, what's going to go on. And I kind of went into a little bit of a downward spiral. But I look back on it now and I realize that redundancy probably saved my life. I was drinking way too much. I was really stressed. I was overweight. And while I've still got a few pounds to go, I've lost a lot. And just things I was not in a really healthy place. And since being made redundant, I've become to be in such a more healthy, having a healthy outlook on life, having a healthy balance in life. And it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, which is to say that now, if I look back at that time, is probably the weirdest thing that I would have said. So, my advice to anyone, or my thought process to anybody is, if you're going through a redundancy right now, this may not be the worst thing that could happen to you.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up a lot on this podcast, and people that I speak to have made big changes in their life, very often the toughest times that they go through are the times that they're most grateful for, because it enables them to do what they're doing today, or gives them that opportunity, or the experience of going through it gives them the skills or knowledge they need.
Yeah, it's so true. And one of the things that we talk about in hypnotherapy, or that I talk a lot about with my clients, is, and I think you've commented on this before as well, is that you never grow while you're in your comfort zone, right? If you want to grow personally, professionally, whatever, physically, you have to go outside of your comfort zone, right? You don't build muscles by lifting 10-pound weights every day, right? It has to come a point where you have to go to 20K and 30K and 40K. And it's the same for our professional life and our personal life and our mental well-being. If you want to grow and develop and improve, you have to step outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, and I really like that analogy, using it as a gym, because there's a lot of people who go to the gym, but then they don't use that in their day-to-day life, and they think, why aren't things getting better? But it's because you're doing the same thing over and over again. For your transition, like obviously the redundancy was a really hard time. What was the biggest challenge through that transition?
I think because I'd had 15 or 16 years with this company. I felt like I was part of that company, and that company was part of me. It was like part of my identity. And to have that almost what felt like ripped away from me, all of a sudden I was kind of like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what my identity is. Is it Peter and the company? Is it Peter and security? Or is it something different? And I think that was the biggest challenge that I kind of saw at first, was trying to figure out what my identity was.
That expectingly would have an impact on your confidence. How did you deal with that?
I think I've genuinely been quite lucky in life, and I think the redundancy happened during the summer in the UK, and it was a particularly nice summer. And I love exercise. I love my bicycle. And once I kind of got my head over this, that I was going to be okay, that I could do this, I kind of got on my push bike and I just cycled around Regent's Park. And for anyone that doesn't know, I'm guessing you've got a lot of listeners that aren't in the UK. It's like a 3-mile loop. And I used to cycle that loop maybe 10 or 12 times every single morning. And that would start my day in just such a beautiful way. My headspace was good. I was starting to feel physically better. And just, life just sort of seemed to start falling back into place for me.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think the point I'm taking there, and what I think listeners should take on board, is a lot of it is feeling good about yourself.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
What were the... Go on, sorry.
No, that's right. I was going to say one of the things that I've noticed since doing hypnotherapy, we talk to people about thinking positively, acting positively, and interacting positively with people, right? And those that are around us. And these don't have to be big things, they can be small things. It can be when you go to the shop, you just have a pleasant conversation with your shop owner, keeper, whatever, right? And when you start to do this, and I was talking to this with someone the other day who was saying that they were struggling with hope. They were feeling like they were a little bit hopeless. And I'm saying, start taking these three positive things, right? Your positive thoughts, your positive actions, and your positive interactions. And they'll start off as being could be small things. I woke up today, right? I got out of bed. I had a chat on the phone with someone. Really small, insignificant things to start with. But what happens is eventually you start to see the positive things in negative situations. So I look back now and I can see the positives in that redundancy. And all of a sudden that helps with your serotonin, your dopamine, your oxytocin, and all the other lovely, happy chemicals that we have as individuals.
Yeah. What was the biggest lesson that you've learned through your journey?
I think don't give up. There are times, and I know a lot of people have said it on here, right? There are times when you want to quit. There are times, and that can be in life. That doesn't have to be in business. That can be in relationships, right? That can be in anything. You want to quit and just walk away. But just walking away isn't the right way to do it, right? You need to have an exit strategy, right? Even if it's from a relationship, you need to sit down and work out why the relationship isn't working for you. And then is that something that your partner's willing to deal with and to kind of negotiate? Because who knows, it may just be that people think it's okay to treat you in a certain way. And unless you stand up for yourself, set yourself boundaries, right, they'll continue to do it. So I think don't give up and walk away. Keep fighting for what you want. And certainly from a business side of things, because there will be things that are within your control and things that aren't within your control, right? And if you give up because of things that aren't within your control, you'll never do anything. You'll never achieve anything. So yeah, don't give up is kind of that piece of advice. The long way of saying it.
No, that's great. With your work that you do and the clients that you have, I'd be interested to know the type of issues that they come to you with. What kind of problems are they looking to solve? Is it similar sorts of things that you've been through, or are you finding it's quite different?
So I target to look for certain issues. Things that I've been through, so relationship breakdown that I had when I was younger. I was in love with someone, love at first sight. If you don't believe in it, you haven't had it happen to you. It can happen. But I was 25, right? And I didn't know how to handle a relationship at 25, not properly. And unfortunately, that relationship failed. And I went through a very hard time with that. And so I like to help people who are going through that issue, right? Because I know it, I understand it, and I can help people with it. But that said, people will come to me with low confidence. People will come to me because they've got a phobia. And phobia work is a lot of fun. I love working with people with phobias because it's something that changes really quickly. And people will go from, I can't possibly to do that, to, oh my God, look what I've done. And they love telling you about the fact that they're now able to do the thing that they thought they never could, which is beautiful. So I love working with people with phobias as well. But there are a myriad of issues that hypnotherapy help with. Those are kind of my favorite ones. But then there's things like stop smoking. I personally haven't had a lot of success or a lot of clients rather that have had this, but there's people that are on antidepressants. who, when using hypnotherapy, have been able to reduce or even come off of their medication. So there's been examples of that. And that's, that can be really powerful. People who think they're dependent on drugs being able to actually get themselves off of that. But I would say now very, very clearly and want it noted that before you reduce or come off of any medication, you should speak to your GP or your doctor, because that's really important first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would love to touch on your experience, both now and having gone through it in the past. You mentioned struggling with depression and anxiety with the workplace and stuff, and it's a topic that I'm quite passionate about because I've also struggled with it as well. And I think with men, often we struggle to talk about it because of the way that our culture is. How does that fit into what you do, your journey, how you went through it before? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I still remember, I didn't realize that I was going through kind of depression and anxiety. I didn't kind of really work it out. And I remember the specific moment that it hit home. And I was sitting outside of Westfield, Stratford, which is where they built the Olympic Village. And I made a phone call to a person in our HR department, and I'd known her for a number of years, and she picked up the phone and she went, "Hello, Peter, are you all right?" And I said no and burst into tears. And I didn't know why. And I had to hang up the phone. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I sat there crying for about 5 minutes in a cafe in the middle of Stratford while everybody kind of walked away and left me. And I then dealt with the one thing that I had to do, and I went home and I went to bed. And then I got really lucky because the people that worked for HR, they wouldn't leave that alone. They were like, I think I had about 20 missed calls by the time I got home. And they kind of just went, just pick up the phone and just say hello so we know you're okay, right? So I got caught before I fell really, really hard. And that was my saving grace. And they kind of said to me, you need to talk, and just talk and talk. And they found people for me to talk to, and they really helped with that. So I think, my advice to anybody that's going through this struggle is talk to someone who you can trust, that will have your confidence. Because I think for men, there's this big thing about, if I talk to someone, it's going to get back to my friends, my work colleagues, and then people will see me as weak. And I remember when a friend of mine was going through a divorce, he was saying the worst insult that he ever got was someone calling him weak. And I think that's a real thing for men, that, if you're perceived to be weak, that's the biggest insult that you can offer them, right? So I think find someone that you can trust, that has your confidence, that will keep your confidence, that you can be completely open with. Because when you find that, that's the most powerful person and the most powerful feeling in the world, to be able to be open with people. And whether that's, we have a thing in the UK called Andy's Man Club, which is a group therapy online. Then you have individuals, right? Professionals like myself. Or if you're part of a company, go to your HR people. They are trained for this now. They are aware of it. And that's the way I would suggest you deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Firstly, thank you for sharing. And secondly, yeah, I think it's so important that people do open up. And is there a way of dealing with that through hypnotherapy?
Yes. So the kind of, and when we did the taster session, when we did that, we kind of I explained a little bit about how our brain works and about how the chemicals in the body work. And when we're going through depression, we don't really produce any of our happy chemicals. We produce very few chemicals at all, which is why people with depression can often stay in bed for days, right? Because they don't have any adrenaline or cortisol to get them out of bed. So hypnotherapy, what that does is that helps us to start finding and producing our happy chemicals, the dopamines, the oxytocin, the serotonin, and our endorphins that can actually help us to get out of bed, go have a shower, brush our teeth, make a cup of tea, eventually leave the house, and do these small steps. I think it was the running coach in like episode 3 or 4 who was saying his mother didn't want to go to get on a plane, and he said, just do small steps, right? So fold your clothes. Now put your clothes in the suitcase. Now bring the suitcase downstairs. Now get in a car. Now drive to the airport. And it's the same principle, right? Just start doing small things that are really easy for you to do and for you to achieve. And I had a lovely interaction with a client. And I had a lovely interaction with a client, and I would never have suggested this in a million years because it's not what I do and it's not how I choose. He was going through low motivation, and he said, well, what should I do? He said, you want me to make a commitment? He said, what? Do I get Alexa to play my favorite song at 7:30 in the morning so that I jump out of the bed dancing? And I went, yes, that's a brilliant idea. Right?
It's great.
It's a brilliant idea. And I don't use Alexa. So never in a million years would I have gone, set your alarm to play that song, right? But that was his thing. So it's whatever drives you to kind of push you and get your endorphins flowing and get you moving. And so hypnotherapy can definitely help with that.
Yeah, and I really like that you touched on that point about just doing one thing, like not looking at the big, not necessarily looking at the bigger picture, just doing small steps and going through and doing what you feel comfortable with until you can get to that stage.
Yeah. And because it becomes so much easier, right? When we look at it, if we're scaling ourselves on a 0, right, and we're in bed and we've got our duvet over our head, to go out to the shops or go and meet friends, that seems like a huge thing that's going to be unachievable. But to actually get out of bed and maybe go to the toilet and make a cup of tea, even if you get straight back into bed afterwards, that's a start, right? Small steps, baby steps.
Yeah, and just making progress.
Yes.
What advice would you give to younger Peter when you were, let's go back to the point just before you got your new manager, when you were being micromanaged? So you were still enjoying the job, things are going pretty well. What advice would you give to him?
It's a tricky one because at that point I was generally very happy in life. I wasn't thinking of changing. And I wasn't thinking about hypnotherapy, right? But I tell you what, there was a time before that, probably back in 2012. So that happened recently. It was like 21, 22, something like that. Back in 2012, so much since in the last 18 months since I've been doing hypnotherapy. The positive thoughts in my head are just there all the time, right? I mean, I spoke about the redundancy. There are others, I've lost, my grandmother passed away a few years ago, right? But you kind of look and go, well, how can that be a positive, Peter, right? How can you see positives in that? Well, she was in her 80s. She was suffering with dementia. She was bedridden for about 3 years before she passed away. So for me, I look at that and say, well, that was actually kind of a nice release for her, right? And am I the kind of person that's so selfish I'd rather she suffered so that I didn't feel pain? Or do I accept that,